Hello, I'm Alice Rhodes. After I finished Aisha, I got started on my next doll repaint, which I decided to do another Winx girl. I did Bloom this time around. And I use a Draculaura doll as my base. It's just an old doll I got at a flea market. It was already pretty damaged from probably being played with. So I went ahead and I just tear out all of her hair after cutting it. I switch between using scissors and pliers just to pull it out. It's best to do this right after it's been in the hot water because it's easier to pull out the hair at that time. After getting all that out, I move on to using acetone to get all the paint off, even all the paint off of her hair, since I'm going to be putting orange over her head instead. So once I get all that removed and I clean up the body of anything that was on there from previously, I get started on making the outfit first. I cut this pattern out just using some scrap paper and using the scrap fabric I have from an old project of mine. I test out to see if the pattern will fit the body, adjusting it as I lay the material over it. So I have to adjust the top quite a bit to make sure it fits around her arms. I'm not the best at making doll clothes, but I'm trying to work on that. I might do a video in the future of just making doll clothes to try to get some more practice. And I sew the pieces together first. Just a little straight stitch along the side as close as I can get to the edge. I just use white thread to sew it because that's what I already had in the sewing machine. Then after I'm done sewing those, I go ahead and I start to blush the body. I use soft pastels to blush, and I switch between orange and pinks to blush her. Just getting her knees, her elbows, any of the joints, and blending it out a bit with the cotton swab. Then I move on to blushing the face. I make sure to spray Mr. Super Clear in between layers. After I get a nice blush down, I will start marking out the eyes with watercolor pencils. I'm using just blue to mark out the outline to begin with. I like to start with a lighter color and then build up, and making sure to fill in the whites of the eyes. It usually takes a few layers to get to as white as I need it, and I just kind of draw the outline of everything else while I'm building up those layers. I'm just building up blues to darken to get the eyelashes. So I don't like to go in with a black until I've already built up that outline, so it's easier to erase if I need to change something. And I make sure to sharpen my pencils constantly. It's best to have a very sharp edge to get all those details in. And I'm matching her up with Aisha because I want to make sure the eye shape is similar, since I'm trying to match up with the style of the Winx clubs as much as possible. And then I go in and I start adding the eyebrows, which I want them to be orange to match her hair, and I just slightly add those in place, erasing here and there to get the shape right. Just matching out their heads to make sure they match. So I don't want them looking too different from each other. Just darkening that outline slowly with time and adding more white to it and making sure I clean as I go. And then I add some color around the nose and lips just to add a little more emphasis on it. Now I start building up the blues for the pupils. I switch between blues and greens to get the colors the way I want them. Slowly going from darkest to lightest to build out a shadow in her eye. And then darkening the eyelashes while I'm at it as well. And the eyebrows, just slowly adding in little hairs to darken it. Having to erase here and there to try to make sure they match on both sides. And then I add more to the lips, just adding a little bit of color and definition to them. My camera started to fall there. You see, I'm just darkening those eyelashes, starting to add the lashes coming off, and going in and darkening the eyes and adding more detail to them. Using the purples for the darkest, greens for the lighter areas, and adding some white here and there just to lighten it. And I use blue for the eyeshadow, just slightly shadowing in from the corners out to the lightest spot on top. And then I go in to darken the eyebrows again with just more of a red color over it to make it darker. And then I add more blush because I realize it's starting to get a little too light. And I, again, go more in on the lips. Just slowly building up colors until I like it. Sometimes I go a little overboard and then I end up not liking it as much. Then I go through and I sew on the outfit, and I also glue the ends here. So you see I have the trim glued down, and I sew the outfit onto the body so it stays on. And then here's the west side started with yarn. Somewhat of a close-up of what the face looked like at the end. I still touch it up some more later on. For the shoes, I had to start over again. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. I made the heels out of paper clay, and I just went ahead and I made sure those were permanently attached to her feet. It worked better that way when I did that with Aisha, so I kept doing that with Bloom as well. And I just use, again, the same scrap material, just cutting out a new shoe outline. And then after I get that all cleaned up and I make sure it's gonna fit, I actually just go in and I hand sew part of it together. I tried gluing it first, but that didn't hold up. So I went ahead and I went in and I hand sewed it, at least the front end. Then from there, I glue it down to the heel, and I glue the back down as well, so it's just permanently stuck on her foot. And I have to pretty much hold it there to make sure it stays. But I just hold them in place and then I glue that down. And I do the same thing with the other shoe. And you see, I also am adding some glitter here and there. I just add some tacky glue to the clothes and then I sprinkle the glitter on there. Me gluing down the other shoe. Now that's drying, I go in and I touch up the face. I glued the yarn wisps off camera. I don't have any footage of that being glued down. But I'm just darkening the blues and adding more whites to try to have more of the contrast on it. I didn't like how it was looking at first. And I want to make sure the eyebrows match the hair more, so I also went in on there. Adding some more whites and then I add the lights to the eye with just acrylic paint, which I just dab my pencil in there and then draw it in. I have very little control of brushes, so it helps me just to dab a pencil in the paint and then go it that way. Just brightening up the lighter spots. And I add some liquid X to the eyes and the lips just to make them nice and shiny. And I go back to add more glitter to the outfit, especially on the shoes. Just gluing things down and then adding the glitter on top of it. I also made a little crown that I was going to stab in her head. I do end up losing that later on though, so it's not on there in the final product. And then I use a blow dryer to heat up the head so then I can pop it back onto the neck peg without breaking it. Which I think I still had to trim it a little bit just to make sure it fits. Okay, I had that back on her. And there she is. And then I use Aisha's wings for the photos. I had lost the wings I made for Bloom along with that crown, so I ended up just using Aisha's wings on Bloom and went and took photos of her out in my yard to get some decent photos. Had some wild flowers that I decided just to take pictures of her with. And I tried to get it while the sun was starting to set so I can get more sun just beaming right down on her. I'll probably post these photos somewhere as well for if people want to look at them. I also got some photos of her in a tree. And that's probably going to be the last Winx Club doll I do. I'm already bored of it, so I'll probably move on to other stuff. But that's Bloom. And I'll try to make some more doll content in the future. It'll be of different characters.